Mars-Pluto aspects have quite a reputation, and for good reason. Whether it's a trine, such as at the start of the LA Rodney King riots in 1992, or an opposition at the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima in 1945, this duo creates the type of collective energy that makes you want to stay at home. Then again, sometimes even with our best efforts, the planets come to us. But is violence and destruction all that we can expect from the upcoming Mars-Pluto oppositions? In this video, I'm going to explore a potential positive side from what is considered one of the most difficult aspects in astrology. My name is Christina.montsma, and I enjoy diving into astrology, history, and psychology to help guide humanity through its seasons. As the saying goes, there's a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. As we've already briefly discussed, Mars-Pluto dynamics can pack quite the destructive punch. But it's important to remember that planets don't reflect inherently good or bad things that will happen, but they do reflect the raw material to make what we will of it, even if those materials are a square filter and a round hole.
Visiting the astronauts with every breath in and out.
Heads up, heads up.
And spokespeople will not comment further.
Go. Heads up, people, look out now.
What's this?
That's what they gotta make.
Well, I hope you got the procedures for me.
Right here.
That's it?
You want to cut the duct tape 3 feet long.
Tell me his arm.
Just use your arm.
It's a good arm length.
Oh, okay, Houston, I see what you're getting at. Hold on. Okay, Jack, tear that piece of tape down the middle lengthwise.
All right?
Hold on, Houston.
I don't know about you, but tearing a 3-foot-long piece of duct tape straight down the middle in zero gravity while facing the prospect of death is not easy. Perhaps the Mars-Pluto trine at the moment of the Apollo 13 disaster was the driver behind one of the most, quote, successful failures in NASA history, depending which word you want to focus on. As Richard Tarnas states in Cosmos and Psyche, Mars, the planet of aggression, and Pluto, the planet of death, may very well represent the, quote, terrifying reality that lurks beneath the surface of things. And perhaps even with good intentions, Ren Butler offers in the archetypal universe that Mars-Pluto dynamics are like raging one's way towards freedom. However, this deathly duo can represent more. Butler offers some more ideas, including the ability to heal or transform situations through a cooperative effort, the struggle between the impulse towards self-preservation and transcendence, and confronting a menacing figure and unloading his gun. Now, I'd like to take those ideas and look at some examples as we enter into a current season of not 1, but 3 Pluto-Mars oppositions across the Capricorn, Cancer, and Aquarius, Leo axes. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. The point is, we're entering a season with similar elements to 2018. For those who speak astrology, I'm referring to the 26th of April when Mars and Pluto conjoined in the sign of Capricorn. However, Mars then retrograded back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius from the 12th of May to the 8th of October, maintaining and reactivating that Mars-Pluto sign-based infusion for nearly 6 months. I chose this period for 2 reasons. One is that it's still recent enough that many people will remember the example stories I'm about to give you. The second is the repeated activation of the Cancer-Capricorn and Leo-Aquarius axes might suggest some general themes to keep in mind in the upcoming months as Mars retrogrades back and forth on the exact opposite side here in 2024. We'll use the descriptions we just covered to briefly see how they manifested in 2018, and then return to each example and dive into how we can extract the positive from this transit. Number 1, a terrifying reality that lurks beneath the surface of things. On the 2nd of October 2018, a Saudi journalist and critic of the Saudi government named Jamal Khashoggi was assassinated inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, which led to significant diplomatic tensions and international outrage. The case was especially gruesome, as the killers dismembered Khashoggi's body and brought it out in pieces in an attempt to evade cameras and visual proof. What's more, the CIA found that the murder was carried out at the behest of the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Since then, US-Saudi relations have been strained. This is certainly the dark side of Mars-Pluto, and it's worth stating so as not to sugarcoat the depth we're dealing with here. Number 2, confronting a menacing figure and unloading his gun. This is an interesting one. On the 12th of June 2018, North Korea and the United States held its first ever summit between the two countries. President Donald Trump traveled to Singapore when the summit was held to discuss the, quote, complete denuclearization of North Korea. Yeah, sometimes astrology is literal. Number 3, the struggle between the impulse towards self-preservation and transcendence. On the 9th of July 2018, after a change in leadership, Ethiopia and Eritrea signed a peace agreement that ended a decades-long deadlock conflict that claimed tens of thousands of lives. Number 4, raging one's way towards freedom. From May to June of 2018, the nationwide Brazilian truck driver strike brought the country to a standstill. Negotiations for the diesel crisis, as it was also known, reflected the struggle between the preservation of livelihood on a mass scale for those who were self-employed and the national economic interests. And number 5, the ability to heal or transform situations through cooperative effort. Many will remember the Thailand cave rescue of 12 boys and their soccer coach in July of 2018. The intense rescue mission lasted 18 days and resulted in the boys and the coach being successfully rescued. As you can see, we have quite a few intense situations here that held different outcomes. We'll return to discuss why that might be in just a moment. First, I'd like to share what I'm reminded of when I think about Pluto-Mars dynamics in general, and that's the concept of rupture and repair. What exactly is rupture and repair? The phrase was coined by the psychoanalyst John Bowlby. It's a concept that's part of a larger theory he developed called attachment theory, which many people today are quite familiar with. Rupture can look like a number of things, from an argument to someone becoming unavailable due to no fault of their own. Repair can also look like a number of things that occur both during the rupture, such as amidst an argument, and afterwards to repair the damage that has occurred. Bowlby observed that healthy cycles of rupture and repair actually deepen and strengthen relationships. In other words, those who can successfully navigate this process end up having a more significant connection than those who do not experience this process. And while this feels counterintuitive, he was pointing to a fundamental concept of human relations. Research tells us that connection is linked to happiness. So to live relatively happy lives, we need to create connection. The basic ingredients to any relationship are trust and support or respect. However, there's a problem. We also fear being let down and rejected, or the lack of trust and respect. So our defense mechanisms kick in to protect ourselves from experiencing these disappointments and rejections before they happen. The problem with this is that it also protects us from true connection as well. We keep our real thoughts and fears to ourselves in hopes of being accepted. Or we shout them at others so that they'll back away. Or we may even try to co-opt others towards our beliefs and desires through passive or underhanded tactics. In order to overcome these ingrained defense mechanisms, we can work with a trained therapist, for example, to better understand where they came from. But there's no substitute for experience. This means when a rupture like an argument happens, how we actually go about repairing the rupture, is what will determine our ability to deepen a relationship, making it stronger than before the rupture. Consider for a moment two couples. The first couple never fights, projecting an image of peace and connection, but they also hold back from one another what they really think and feel. The second couple does have fights, including tears and hurt feelings. However, they're also able to forgive and trust a little bit more and possibly let go a little bit more each time there's a rupture, because they take the time to listen to what the other is saying instead of responding with defensiveness. Which couple do you think will feel happier and more connected in the end? This is what Bowlby's idea was getting at. The more experiences we have with a given person, group, or entity that facilitate healthy repair, the more a person will open up, trust, and respect the other. And learning how to repair is actually facilitated by connection with others. It's essentially a slow-growing, positive feedback loop that pays dividends, including the ingredients for good make-up sex. However, Bowlby's concepts on what constitutes a healthy attachment drew so much resistance that he wasn't even able to publish many of his ideas until much later. But Bowlby's impact ended up becoming global by advocating to the World Health Organization to change things like hospital admissions policies for children. How did he do that? He developed a relationship with Donald Winnicott, whom Bowlby stated none of it would have been possible without Winnicott's help. But Bowlby and Winnicott didn't agree on everything and took vastly different approaches to their research. But their collaborative effort and regular exchanges is what made the difference. On a side note, I pulled up Bowlby's natal chart with an aching suspicion, and what do you know? A wide Mars-Pluto opposition. He literally lived his theory of rupture and repair, even in sharing his theory with the medical and psychological communities. And just like the examples discussed earlier, different people have harnessed their natal Mars-Pluto opposition differently. While Joseph Stalin became known as a dictator, Mohandas Gandhi became known as a nonviolent civil rights activist. Richard Nixon is known for hiding dark material, while Mary Shelley is known for exposing the world to Gothic material through her book Frankenstein. The power and drive is there, but we still have choices in how to use it. So going back to rupture and repair, what's the takeaway? Connection is like going to the gym. If you go regularly but never push your muscles, there's not going to be any growth. But if you engage in a healthy conversation with your body of what you want it to do, but the limits it's telling you to not go beyond, you're going to get stronger and avoid injury. So, is the point to start arguments so that you can grow? No. There's enough fundamental differences between any two people that disagreements and differences of opinion are inevitable, no matter how committed, in love, or attuned the two people are. But when conflict does happen, the way they choose to navigate the repair is the deal breaker. In fact, consider this research from Drs. John and Julie Gottman, the relationship experts who have been studying what makes healthy relationships for over 50 years. Through numerous tests and questionnaires, they found that there is nothing you can measure that predicts whether two people will be interested in one another. In fact, you can find out what someone exactly wants in a partner, go out and find that person, and introduce them to that person, and they will actually be more unlikely to be interested in them. This has to do with connection being actively created and not something inherent or checked off of a list. However, once people are together, you can measure their likelihood to have a successful relationship, though again, it has more to do with their behavior, not compatibility. The Gottmans found that it's the way the two people behave and treat each other on the day-to-day that will tell you if they'll be together 6 or 10 years later. Again, not compatibility. If you want to learn more about this, you can look up their work on the 4 horsemen, which are essentially the 4 apocalyptic signs that an end to the relationship is likely with 90% accuracy. I may go into this more in a future video, so you can also stay tuned for that. But I know there's other questions about this whole concept, such as the level of rupture that occurs. Consider, for example, an affair with a relationship that has an agreement that they won't be involved with other people. Depending on the research you focus on, roughly 20 to 25% of relationships will survive an affair. However, the Gottmans developed a strategy to address and repair the rupture of an affair and found that if applied, the cure rate of affairs went up to 75%. In fact, they also found that when they applied this method with a trained therapist and addressed the patterns or behavior in the relationship, not the partner, the patterns, the cheating actually ended up helping the relationship gain deeper intimacy and connection as compared to prior to the affair. Again, this is not a license to create an affair in the name of connection, but it is hopeful, I think, to know that it's possible to turn around even devastating experiences of betrayal. Let's go back to the 5 examples from 2018 we covered earlier and take a look at the rupture, as well as the effort or behavior applied in the repair. While these examples are world events, they're still made up of individuals, sometimes with one person making the difference. Number 1. In the example of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, the tension between the Saudi government and Khashoggi's opinion of them resulted in tragedy and escalated national tensions. The use of violence to solve differing opinions is never a healthy form of repair. This can, however, be a form that Mars-Pluto reflects if those acting go to that extreme. At its most basic level, repair requires naming the issue, not trying to silence it. Number 2, with the North Korea-US summit, there was certainly the appearance of an agreement or a repair. However, while there were some nominal gestures from North Korea to show compliance, the agreement lacked specific and binding commitments or timelines, thus making it unenforceable. A second summit was planned in the summer of 2019, but ultimately didn't happen. Repair is a process, not a performance, and it addresses specifically what needs to happen in order to find a way forward. Number 3. The Brazilian truck drivers' strike was a mixed bag of examples of what not to do in a negotiation and coming to an agreement. For example, when the truckers expressed their willingness to strike if the government didn't address the rising fuel costs, the government essentially ignored them. After being on strike for a few days, the lack of critical supplies, food, and fuel was shutting down parts of the economy. So President Timur asked for a truce for a few days to sort things out. After meeting with some representatives, he announced they had agreed on a temporary pause so they could negotiate. However, the truckers saw this as insincere and continued on with the strike and the blockades. Some of their behavior was quite extreme, such as threatening gas stations if they dared restock on fuel, puncturing tires so trucks could not be moved even by force, and even killing a fellow trucker who wanted out of the strike. The government responded by attempting to fine them and open the blockades by force. While the eventual deal temporarily alleviated the crisis, the underlying structural problems in Brazil's logistics, fuel pricing, and trucking industry persisted. So yes, there was an agreement, but truckers remained a volatile force in Brazilian politics, with renewed talks of another strike only a year later. Repair includes listening even when you don't agree, and ideally seeing how the rupture impacted the other. Number 4, the Ethiopia-Eritrea peace agreement is an interesting one because an initial attempt at repair was made way earlier. Essentially, a border war between the two countries from 1998 to 2000 resulted in the Algiers Agreement in 2000. But it wasn't until 2018 that the peace treaty was finally signed. Essentially, both countries ended up using the conflict to enforce a militarized state to prevent internal instability. The unresolved conflict was a justification for maintaining strict control over the people. However, the fever broke with a change of leadership when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took office and sought to resolve Ethiopia's internal challenges by focusing on reconciliation. The result took an incredible international effort and determination as well, and included participation from the UN, the African Union, and many individual countries in the Horn of Africa. To date, embassies have reopened, trade has resumed, people are allowed more free movement, and Abiy Ahmed won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 for his efforts. There has been some conflict since the peace treaty, most notably the war in Tigray, but the agreement still remains intact. Real repair requires owning one's own role in what happened and being willing to address it, irregardless of the other side. And number 5, in my opinion, the Thailand cave rescue is a pretty remarkable example of a Mars-Pluto dynamic, albeit it's arguably easier to get behind a rescue mission than it is a peace deal. Still, the situation drew an incredible international effort of more than 10,000 individuals, including British divers, as well as a former US Navy SEAL and a Thai Navy SEAL, who both lost their lives as a result of the event. The mobilization of resources and effort were complicated by multiple factors, including the threat of more incoming monsoon flooding, dropping oxygen levels, the difficulty or impossibility of drilling escape passages, the lack of diving experience for those trapped, and even some language barriers. However, all 13 individuals were successfully rescued, and those from the Golden Triangle, a nationless region between countries, were even granted citizenship. Repair fundamentally requires cooperation toward a shared goal, no matter how difficult. Now, I don't know about you, but the last example is the kind of cooperation I don't hear about often enough. But it shows that complex ruptures with limited options can still result in successful failures that might end up being less of a failure than we think it is. This is what Mars-Pluto is getting at. It's going deep, cutting to the heart of the matter, allowing the harmful pent-up stuff underneath the surface out that's been slowly eroding the relationship and transforming the latent passion that's there. Between November 3, 2024 and April 27, 2025, we will be experiencing 3 Mars-Pluto oppositions. While there will undoubtedly be intensity and rupture, there's also a choice in how we will engage each other. Choosing repair might not feel easy, but it's important to remember that rupture is not inherently a sign of doom. Repair is a process, and we've got 6 months to figure out how to do something differently. It goes further than just saying, "I'm sorry," but sometimes even saying that helps get the ball rolling. So, when rupture occurs around you, with you, or to you, remember that repair includes 1, naming what has happened, 2, owning our role in what happened, 3, listening to and seeing how the rupture impacted others, 4, considering how the rupture was co-created, and 5, exploring a way forward in the relationship collaboratively. Until next time, remember, there's a time for repair.